bridging into another story where the narrative of the media may not pan out to be reality. Ahmaud Arbery, everybody knows the story. It was the McMichael brothers who spot someone who they think
son and father.
Yeah, sorry, son and father, who spot someone in someone else's neighborhood, what they say was scoping out a place, checking out a building under construction. They were suspicious. They started tailing him in a pickup truck, armed. When they tried to put him under citizen's arrest, Ahmaud Arbery grabbed the gun of one of the McMichael's son, ended up getting shot, dying, and McMichael, son and father, charged with murder. And the initial story coming out of the media was Ahmaud Arbery was out for a jog, and you can't even jog in the country. I think you were particularly critical of LeBron James for his
jogging
tweets
while black, and he was killed for jogging while black.
Now, now I know what I feel about this one, and I've been saying it from the beginning. So whether or not he was jogging, I say, even assuming what they say is true, this is not the way things should go in a society that doesn't fall apart at the seams. But in the case now, the news is that the McMichaels brothers, the McMichael father and son, have filed a motion to disclose or to add additional evidence. And all of the evidence is a series of past conduct by Ahmaud Arbery, other incidents, criminal in nature, suspicious in nature. And it's a 9-page document. I think there's close to like 10 or 12 incidents that they want to bring in as evidence. One of which is carrying a concealed firearm to a sporting game and gets chased down by the cops. Another one where he was scoping out a place potentially for stealing from it. Another one where he was involved in a violent attack with wire cutter, et cetera, et cetera. So this motion, I've never seen this motion. It looks, to someone who doesn't know better, and I'm including myself there, it looks like what they're saying it's not. In the motion, they say this is not an attack on character. This is trying to prove elements that are going to be relevant to explain what happened that day. To me,
it's modus operandi evidence. And so, similar to what came up in Floyd, how much of Floyd's past could come in, particularly his 2019 arrest, and it's the degree to which it's common. And so the idea is that they're not introducing the evidence to show he was a bad person. They're introducing the evidence to show that he had a pattern of comparable conduct that made their interpretation of his conduct reasonable, because objective reasonableness can be a factor in a wide range of self-defense or citizen's arrest context. And so what they document it's what, we talked about, what I said at the time, which is I said, I'm sorry, I didn't buy that he was out jogging. I said that doesn't necessarily exculpate the father and son. But I said the idea that he was shot while jogging is nonsense, that in all likelihood he was casing out properties under the guise that he was jogging, and that there was a lot of inferential reasons to believe that, and that has turned out to be absolutely true. He apparently goes out jogging and then cases places and breaks into places repeatedly, and had done so at least more than a half dozen times in the incidents leading up to this. He also, it turned out, was the guy in the house months before that the son had seen, that the son had called on. So, this wasn't architectural viewing and and again, these are some of the ludicrous explanations and excuses the sort of BLM media narrative is, rather than just saying maybe the guy's conduct is wrong, the father and son, without saying, oh, he's this nice, choir boy who just likes to jog and look at, houses under construction.
It is the problem because, in my mind, and I've said it from the beginning, it wouldn't change anything in my mind. But when people discover that they have been so misled from the beginning, it's going to change something in their mind. And there's almost a risk, there's the risk of the backlash, where you're treating people like they're idiots by saying literally, he was out for a jog, and then he came across a building under construction and he's got an interest in it and he decided to go see the building under construction. There's nothing wrong with that. And at some point in time, you might be inclined to believe them until you realize you've been lied to over and over and over again, as seems to be the case this time. I think people might get angry with the statement. I think that original narrative has crumbled. I don't think that narrative stands.
Completely. So, now, there's a lot of bad evidence about the father and son. I mean, there's some evidence on the son in particular, a lot of racist statements, some other things.
Apparently he made a racial slur as Ahmaud Arbery lay on the ground, dying. And there's I've said it from the beginning also. This is not how things should be done. I don't care that you have the right to make citizens arrest. If the guy's burglarizing the neighborhood, you call the cops so that it doesn't end this way. Effectively, it doesn't end this way, regardless of whether or not.
But there'll be more of this if we start defunding police and police are scared to enforce the law. Part of the reason why that happened was inadequate police responses to prior burglaries in that neighborhood. And police calls in that neighborhood.
Well, there's no question about that. And then you get into the situations like Kyle Rittenhouse, where police are not doing what they need to do, and then you need literally people to do it for you. In the McMichaels case, now, having read that motion, and it's divided into two pieces. I might do a video on it just because it's interesting to go through, but the motion reads, I don't care that they say they're not victim blaming or they're not attacking, impugning character. It reads like they are. I read it and say, okay, all of this may be fine and well, but they knew none of it. They thought he was casing the neighborhood, but they knew none of his prior violent arrests. They're going to say, yeah, but that explains the way he reacted to being put under citizen's arrest, and he tried to grab the gun, and therefore, it explains what happened that day a little more. It's going
to be a lot like the Floyd analysis of the prior arrest. So it's going to be, how much is this relevant? How much does the Arbery state of mind, how much of that is relevant to some element in the case, such as, say, objective reasonableness? So like in Floyd's case, he only introduced the part that showed that Floyd had previously, when under arrest, done a sudden ingestion of drugs to prove that fact. Now, the prosecution could mute all this by not pursuing Ahmaud Arbery as the sweethearted kid who just likes to take a jog who these crazy people chase down. But they, of course, a lot of these cases, they can't help themselves. I mean, we saw tons of evidence of that there's a Minnesota evidentiary predicate that allows them to bring in that kind of thing. But I think it's very problematic. That the person is perfect and so on and so. This was a big mistake in the OJ case too, by the way. Trying to portray Nicole as this perfect person backfired on that jury pool. So but I think it depends. Not everything will come in, but what may come in is anything that shows modus operandi that's relevant to the objective reasonableness and to the degree the prosecution is contesting it. So, I mean, like, the only reason why the 2019 arrest came in Floyd's case is because the prosecution would not concede that he possibly had sudden ingestion of drugs, even though they found the drugs in the back of the squad car and in his toxicology report. So they could have avoided all that by just saying, well, and just go with the medical examiner, but they didn't. So the prosecution will have a lot of say on whether or not that evidence comes in. But my guess is some of it will, but not all of it will.
I say the prior scoping of joints, even that, they're going to say, okay, so he had done it in the past, doesn't explain anything now. It might explain the frame of mind. That was the only one where it might explain the frame of mind, where McMichael's son says, we've seen this guy in the neighborhood. So,
well, the other part is interpreting the reason. In other words, we can't know fully what the McMichaels thought or saw. And if they're saying, look, he's behaving like this based on our behavior, independent confirmation that he had a history and habit of doing so potentially could be relevant, especially if objective reasonableness is a component. It really depends on what elements there are and what the prosecution is willing to stipulate to.
And who's the judge in this case? Do we know who the judge is that's going to hear this?
A local state court judge. The prosecutor's been brought in from out of town, so he's a political guy. So they've already tried to get him kicked from the case unsuccessfully.
Okay, so they'll succeed. They'll get something of it, not all of it. Everyone's win-win, and
they may get none of it. But usually they introduce something if they can show go to some element of fact that the jury is supposed to determine in the case, which sometimes only the other person's state of mind can be relevant for that. But it definitely becomes relevant if they want to make Ahmaud Arbery, if the government introduces character evidence on his behalf, then they open that door.
The way I read it, it looked like an overreach. They were asking for a lot of stuff, some of which was only incidentally, potentially tangentially relevant. I wouldn't be surprised if a judge says it made it look weaker by asking for everything than just picking the three most potentially relevant things. If I had to guess, based on what I know from here, it's irrelevant. But I would say they might get nothing, and but it does depend on the judge. What's the time frame on that? I mean, do they schedule a hearing for it, and is it going to be a big issue that we're going to hear about, or does it go by relatively
the media won't talk about it at all, because the media has been totally silent about this. So it's only the people that are tracking the court docket have even come across this. I mean, it's extraordinary, the stories they will tell and they won't tell.